Imagine if that same Gen Z class could get rid of their income tax. How would that change their debt to income ratio if they had no income tax? How much more extra money would they have for a mortgage? Also, property taxes should be abolished.
All right, so welcome to the podcast. This is the first one since a little hiatus we've been on, but we have some important stuff to discuss today. Today, my guest is Vin DiBenedetto, good friend of mine. We go back a long way. He's third time on the podcast, I believe, now. And so what's new? What do you got going on?
Thanks, Rich. I appreciate it. You know, I always love chopping it up with you on the power of now. How much, man? You know, staying active on X. That's my favorite these days, at Guido Vin. But that's it, man. You know, it's just becoming more and more apparent that the Uniparty is failing us. I think they came out a poll like 62% of Americans feel the need for a third party. Well, I have good news for them. The Libertarian Party already has ballot access in every state. So I think our time is now to really put liberty on the forefront and take us in a new libertarian way forward. You know, because every mistake both parties make, man, is really just antithetical to libertarian beliefs. But yeah, every politician campaigns like a libertarian and then goes back and does whatever the corporate party and corporate donors tell them to do.
Yeah, that's how I feel a lot now. And it's interesting because I feel like when Democrats have a Democratic president in office, I can't remember any time I've seen the Democrats hold their politicians accountable, except for John Fetterman. John Fetterman's like the first one where they're going back on him. But in reality, he's kind of doing what he always said he believed. It's interesting to me because when you see somebody like Trump who campaigns on a lot of promises and then does the opposite, you have a lot of his supporters that are diehard fans that are sitting back saying, oh no, this is what he said he was going to do all the time. I love what he's doing. Very few of them will come forward and call him out for what he's doing, but at least some do. At least you do see some people, you know, giving him resistance on the stuff that he's doing that they don't agree with. Whereas I feel like with like Democratic presidents we've seen that do the opposite of what they say they're going to do, you don't see them catch a lot of flack. I can't remember a time when I've seen, like, I didn't see anybody, you know, go after Obama from the left when he was dropping bombs on innocent kids overseas. Biden, I didn't expect him to get a lot of flack because he kind of didn't do much outside of what he said he was going to do, so I get that. But going back to when Obama was president, because he was the last Democratic president before Biden, he did a lot of things that were contrary to what he said he was going to do, and he didn't get called out by the Democrats for it. He also did a lot of stuff that he said he was going to do that are the same things that Trump is doing now, that Democrats are saying that they're against, but they didn't give him any flack for that at the time. So it's just interesting to see, you know, that dynamic. And I hope that people that are fed up with being lied to during the campaign can all kind of rally together and start to say, hey, we do need a third party. And I want to see that for both sides.
No, absolutely, brother. I agree with you. They campaign like libertarians, and then they do exactly what their corporate donors and corporate parties tell them to do every single time.
Are you talking about like AIPAC and those kind of donors?
AIPAC, yeah, but they certainly have a big, significant influence. But, you know, it's always been that way. You know, oil bought the Republicans, green energy bought the Democrats, big pharma bought both. Now AI buys both, you know, so AIPAC's in there too, but there's plenty others. And, you know, they just buy both parties. But that's why I think, you know, the Libertarian Party is the way forward. So what do you think? Two questions, Rich. What made you a libertarian? And what do you think the Libertarian Party's biggest hurdle is for getting independents and right-leaning people like you to vote libertarian up and down the ticket, from presidential to governor to local?
Ron Paul made me a libertarian. I was young, and everything that he said was already things that I believed in. I already had a lot of these ideas that I didn't feel represented by either party. When I was growing up, I had a family member that was addicted to drugs, and he would find himself in and out of jail, prison, mostly for nonviolent drug offenses. And I always, from like a young kid, I mean like 7 or 8 years old, I remember like saying to my parents, like, I don't understand why they're locking him in jail for that. Like, that's his decision on what he wants to do with his body. He's an adult. Obviously, if he robs somebody, steals from somebody, harms another human being, and there's a victim for his crime, then yeah, he should be locked up for that. But I don't understand why they're locking him up for deciding to put a chemical into his own body. That never made sense to me. You know, why are we at war? And as a 7-year-old kid, I was able to see that. And then, you know, getting older, seeing the wars that we were in, the conflicts we were involved in, growing up, seeing 9/11 in New York City, growing up in the suburbs of New York City, seeing that happen and wondering why we're being attacked. Why do these people hate us? And the response being that they hate our freedom didn't make sense to me. So I looked deeper into it. And then I hear Ron Paul talking about like the real causes for why people in the Middle East hated America and hated our way of life. It was not because we were free, but it was because we were interfering with their way of life and killing and overthrowing democratically elected governments all over the world. When I started to see that coming from somebody who was like, the Libertarian Party already had a lot of my values, and I just didn't know it existed until I heard about Ron Paul. And so that's when I made the decision, oh yeah, I'm a libertarian. Everything that they say makes sense to me. I would hear some Republicans speak and I would say, I agree with this, I agree with that, but I don't agree with this and I don't agree with that. I would hear some Democrats speak and I'd say, I agree with this, I agree with this, but I don't agree with that and I don't agree with that. Then I would hear a libertarian speak and everything that they said made sense. And most people I would speak to just about topics, I feel like most Americans really do have libertarian values, but they just don't think that the party exists that represents those values. They think they have to choose the lesser of two evils.
You think that's the biggest hurdle then, is that people think that we're stuck in the dynamic of the two parties?
Because even the people that do know the Libertarian Party exists, they think it's a joke. They think that it's a waste of a vote. They don't think that there's a path to winning major elections for that party. So they don't want to waste their vote. And that causes us to stay trapped in the two-party system. We need to have more people that are bold enough to take that leap and say, I'm wasting my vote anyway. If I'm voting for the lesser of two evils, that's a waste of a vote. Let's actually vote for what we believe in and not what we think is going to win and still keep us having the same problems decade after decade. Because the more people actually are willing to vote libertarian and we start to see the numbers go from 2% and 3% to maybe 5%, and then at 5% we get on the debate stage, then you have a little bit more credibility. Then you can go from maybe 5% to 10%, 12%, 15%. Once you start seeing numbers like that in a popular vote, then it doesn't look like such a fucking joke anymore.
No, 100%, brother, 100%. I think, the good news is, I think the party's been growing every year. It's the third largest party. It's been growing. I think the new president, Stephen Nakala, I think he's doing a good job. He's got really big goals. I like that. I like people with big goals for the party. He wants to be as big as the other two parties. And there's a lot of libertarian infighting. Like, a lot of people who like him don't like Angela McArdle, who made the deal with Trump. I don't care about any of that. You know what I mean? We have so many other bigger problems. But I think, she did a good job advancing liberty, freeing Ross Ulbright and putting, libertarians on a bigger stage. And I think he's doing a great job being a stricter libertarian, running libertarian candidates. But on the policies, I couldn't agree more. I mean, even abortion, the most divisive issue, libertarians believe that the state shouldn't have the power to make that decision. So that's something I think everyone can get behind. And nobody cares, about victimless crimes. And we think taxes should be voluntary. Like, for example, a sales tax is voluntary because you could choose not to buy it. An involuntary tax is when I have people I know personally who are living 5 and 6 deep in a trailer park, and a few of them are walking a Dollar General to work, and every week there's a deduction for income tax coming out of that person's paycheck. That's when our system's broken, folks. People, our poorest people, are paying income taxes. What are we doing? So I think all the libertarian policies are most popular, and I think it's only up from here. I think we're going to be more and more well known. I think we grow every year, so I have big hopes.
Yeah, I think the internet helps with that too. And I think that a big part is getting, I thought, man, Gary Johnson, I thought, was going to get us onto a debate stage, because he was polling really well until that whole Aleppo blunder. And like nobody really thought he was going to win, but I thought he was going to at least get that 5% threshold to get us on the next debate stage. But I think that Aleppo blunder like threw off his whole campaign. And it was kind of like if you were a Mets fan, Red Sox fan, when they had the World Series against the Mets and that ground ball went under Billy Buckner's legs. It was like watching that replay over and over again. I was like, the Libertarians just got fucked again. And I really just, because when you look at the last time there was a third-party candidate on the debate stage, it was Ross Perot. And I don't remember how much of the popular vote he got, but it was significant. And that's why they started blocking third-party candidates from getting on that debate stage, because they were scared that the system might fall apart. And we need, even if I think that actually the first thing we should do is get that rule changed. If we could find a way to get that rule changed before the 2028 election cycle, that would be huge for the Libertarians, because if we had a Libertarian on that debate stage for a presidential debate, I think it would open people's eyes a lot.
I think what you have to keep in mind is the Presidential Debate Commission is comprised of half Republicans and half Democrats, and they can't agree on anything. But one thing they can agree on is keeping everybody off that stage, because they know exactly that. So that's the problem with the Presidential Debate Commission. And then there's also the issue of ballot access. Like, for example, Larry Sharpe is running for governor of New York for like the 5th time in a row, but you can't run as a Libertarian and be on the ticket, so it's kind of like a moot point. I think the only way you can kind of get that done is what Angela McArdle did and endorse Trump in order for concessions. Whether you think he fulfilled them to our benefit or not is another conversation, but I think that's the only way. Like, if the Libertarian Party in New York went to Elise Stefanik, who's going to be the Republican frontrunner, and said, look, we'll back you on this one if you promise that there'll be a line for Libertarians on the ballot. You'll propose that bill. I think you got to force it back. Just like liberty, once the government takes it from you, there's no asking for it back. You got to fight for it back. That's why we got to start fighting for our freedoms now. But same thing with that. I think we would have to really push the envelope. Stefanik needs that 2-3 points. I think this is the election to hold her feet to the fire, tell her, give us a libertarian line on the, give us a bill that gives us a libertarian line, and maybe we can topple Hochul.
I don't want to sound like I'm pessimistic, but I think that there's going to be a lot more years of fighting before we get there. I think that we need more wins at the local level, and then for those politicians that win at the local level, when they can prove themselves and that the policies work and that they're popular and they could work their way up, I think that's going to be the path. Even though it's going to take decades, we could see it happen. I mean, it's kind of interesting because even when you look at Gary Johnson, they made him the Libertarian candidate. He was a Democratic governor, wasn't he, of New Mexico? I think he won that election as a Democrat. Or no, did he win it as a I think it might have been a Republican. I know he wasn't Democrat when he won that election. Yeah, he was a Republican. That's what it was. He was a Republican, and he won a state that had been controlled by Democrats for a long time. I think maybe there's something there to getting people that are libertarian. I mean, it's probably not a popular opinion, but you kind of need to ride the coattails of these other parties to get into a place of power. Like even Ron Paul, he was a Republican technically, even though he was a libertarian at heart.
Same with Thomas Massey, Rand Paul.
Right. And I mean, Rand Paul's not anywhere near as libertarian as his father was, but he's one of the closest things we have right now that's at a high level of government. So I still do stand with Rand, even though he's not 100% on the libertarian side of things. He does do things that are libertarian, though. Like, people don't give him any credit for authoring the Breonna Taylor law. Why doesn't he, and like, why don't Republicans get any credit for doing things like that, that people that claim they're Democrats want to have happen? When Republicans are able to push laws through that the Democrats agree with, they get no credit for it anywhere.
No, I know. That's just, another symptom of the Uniparty's game. They divide and conquer.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get your take on the 50-year mortgage. Yeah, it's an interesting one. And the best argument I heard for it, it's a deeper argument. It's that if it lowers the barrier of entry for young Americans, which is questionable if that $300 savings is really going to lower the barrier, but let's assume it does, and a lot more young Americans can buy homes, they will now have ownership stake in the country. And if you look at the elections of Mamdani and other ones that we've touched on, you know, another guy that campaigned with some libertarian policies, and he'll be another corporate Democrat. But if you look at how Gen Z and these younger generations are going, they're going communist because they have no stake. They can't afford a home. They have no ownership. So the best argument for this 50-year mortgage is that, well, at least they'll own a home. They'll have a stake in the country, and maybe then they'll care about the future of our country and capitalism. So that's kind of the push. So I wanted your take on that one, brother.
To me, it's indentured servitude, because how old are most people that are first-time home buyers right now?
That number was horrible.
I don't remember exactly what it was, but let's say it's...
or something.
No, it's not 60, but let's say it's even 40.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to buy your first home when you're 40, and you're not going to be done paying it off till you're 90. And so, to me, it's a modern-day slavery is what it is. It's you're enslaving yourself to the banks. And I don't know how many more people are going to qualify for a loan, because when you get a mortgage, at least in New York State, I can't speak to other states, but the way it is here, it's not just about can you afford the monthly payment. They want to know how much money's in your bank account. They want to know, do you have any tax liens? They want to know how much debt do you have? Are you in credit card debt? Most people are getting disqualified for loans. They could afford the loan. It's all the other bullshit. So it has nothing to do with, hey, it's actually people that are paying more money to rent an apartment. They're paying more money to rent a smaller apartment than they would be paying on a monthly mortgage, even with the mortgage payment, the utilities, the insurance, the taxes. They're still paying a bigger monthly nut to rent an apartment or rent a house. So we already know they could afford it. It's not about if you could afford it or not. It's, can you jump through all the other hurdles? Do you have time? The amount of time it takes to get a fucking mortgage in this country is ridiculous. You have to be, this is why everybody uses a mortgage broker, because they can't sit there and compile all these documents and talk to these loan officers and shop around. So you have to get a broker who then gets a piece of that commission too. And that broker does nothing but call you fucking 12 times a day and say, hey, I need these documents from you. I need those documents from you. So I don't think it's going to lower the threshold at all. I think the same people that are qualifying for loans today are going to qualify for these loans. And if they're financially illiterate and they say, oh, I'm saving $300 a month, that's great. Now I could, instead of driving an Accord, I'll be able to drive a Benz. That's what they're going to do. They're going to strap themselves down into more debt. And if they're financially literate, they're not going to take these loans. They're going to still want to get a 30-year mortgage and try to pay it off in 15 if they can. I think that allowing banks to exploit people like this is not going to be good. I think if this passes, it's going to be bad for people. And the problem is they're not going to know it until they're 20 years or 30 years into paying. Imagine being 30 years, it being 25 years into paying a mortgage and being like, oh, I'm halfway done. Fuck that.
Yeah, that's heavy.
Even being 25 years and still having 5 years left is an uphill battle. I can't imagine the stress and all that. The other thing that does too, so I remember seeing Ben Shapiro going on, oh, why would anybody want to retire? That's stupid. You should work till you die. And that's what it sounds like the Republicans want. They want people to be hardwired into a life of servitude and labor-driven. Like, again, it's a way to enslave people. It's modern-day feudalism. And by the way, that's not even taking into account the extra money you're paying in interest to the banks. It's just a way to squeeze more out of people, squeeze more resources out of us. What we need is lower home prices and lower interest rates.
I couldn't agree with you more, man. The Fed, I'm going to end the Fed libertarian, so I couldn't agree with you more. But I think the libertarian solution for all the critics to the Libertarian Party, I think the libertarian solution to the housing problem is very simple. Imagine if that same Gen Z class could get rid of their income tax. How would that change their debt to income ratio if they had no income tax? How much more extra money would they have for a mortgage? Also, property taxes should be abolished. That's going to lower your monthly. That's going to make a lot more people be able to buy homes. And I know, how are we going to pay for things? Well, maybe, just maybe, the politicians are going to have a few less comedy roasts, a few less dinners, and they're going to have a few more business meetings on how to generate money out of all the resources at their disposal, besides just taxing us and then going out to eat.
Yeah, stop spending money, lower the spending, Stop giving so much money away to other countries. Quit bombing people. I mean, Doge was the biggest waste of fucking time that I've ever seen in my life. They spent 4 or 5 months figuring out how to lower spending. They wanted to lower the spending by $2 trillion, then they added $4 trillion to the budget. Well, like, if you take 2 steps forward and 4 steps back, you just took 2 steps back, my dude. That was the biggest fucking waste of time in history. And then they wonder why Elon Musk goes on Twitter and says that Trump is in the fucking Epstein files. I would want to roast that motherfucker and ruin his life too. I just spent months of my life trying to make this country better. Didn't get paid for it. And I did all this work just for the president to turn around and then spend twice what I saved. Imagine if you sat down with your wife one day and you said, listen, sweetheart, we're in a lot of debt. We can't afford this debt that we're in. You're spending too much money at Louis Vuitton. You're spending too much money at wherever, right? We got to stop spending on these credit cards. So you sit down at a computer for hours going through the budget and saying, look, this is where we need to cut spending. Boom, 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 boom. And you cut the spending down by 20%. And then the next month you get your credit card statement and she spent twice as much money as you saved. That's what Trump just did to Elon Musk. You would lose your fucking mind. Like, we just had this conversation. We can't afford this shit. And so that's why Elon lost his mind, and I don't blame him for that shit. And so we're spending too much money. You know, to your point about taxes, if you make $100,000 a year in New York State, $30,000 of that is taken out of your paycheck.
Criminal.
Think about what you could do with that $30,000.
That's a year's worth of mortgage payments.
It's a year's worth of mortgage payments. And if you can save that money for 2 years, that's your down payment and your closing cost on a home. So you want to talk about giving people more access to home ownership, get rid of income taxes, and there'll be a clearer path to home ownership.
And to be clear, only the libertarians want to get rid of the income tax. The Republicans are great at saying they do, but they really don't.
DeSantis has no state income tax in Florida.
Yeah, DeSantis is doing good. I have high hopes for him. He'd put the no property tax on the ballot. But, you know, these Trump tax cuts, I cringe when they say, oh, the biggest tax cut of all time. It's really not.
One other point I was going to hit on with the affordability, right? Everybody talks about affordability. And you never hear people mention, well, why did things become so unaffordable? Go back to the gold standard. People say billionaires shouldn't exist. Go to before the gold standard. You know how many billionaires there were back then? Maybe a handful. It wasn't that common. You basically had like Rockefeller and a couple other guys, Carnegie.
The Jekyll Island crew that created the Fed, basically. Or the billionaires.
Yeah, those were the only ones. Then we got off the gold standard. We increased the money supply by trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. So if you adjust billionaires' net worth, if you go back to the gold standard, what the money supply was, if you adjust the billionaires in this country's net worth, we would have way fewer billionaires than we do right now. We would have a much smaller gap. The wealth inequality would be much smaller, and the prices of homes would be much less. And so the reason why that's not a popular idea is because it eliminates a lot of credit. You would have a lot less credit to give out because you can't just write something down on paper and all of a sudden, boom, here's a $1 trillion for the government to spend. Here's, $10 billion for this. Look, all the banks, they could lend out money. So we got addicted to credit. First, the government got addicted to credit, and then shortly after that, the banks followed suit and gave us all credit and got the people all addicted to credit. There were no 30-year mortgages back then, because the money supply was less, and so there were less billionaires, and the wage gaps were less. So what we really need is honest money to get us back on point, because you won't have these, like the stock market right now is so overinflated, and that's all based on credit. If we eliminate a lot of this credit, which we're going to have to fucking do, the credit in this country is, the whole credit market is fucked up. If you look at 60-day and 90-day delinquencies on auto payments, on credit card payments right now, they're at higher levels than we've seen since the global financial crisis in 2008. Foreclosures are up 20%. I just got a text from a coworker of mine about foreclosures being up 20%. So the problem is that we can't afford these loans that we're getting ourselves into. And so if we could eliminate a lot of that by getting us back onto an honest monetary system, get rid of the fractional banking system, and we make people learn how to balance a checkbook again, both at home and like our state politicians and our federal politicians, it's going to save our grandchildren from a disaster, which I don't know if it's already too late. I don't know if they're even trying to stop this from happening. You know, I've heard the theory that they want the dollar to crash so that they could pay off the $37 trillion debt with basically monopoly money.
Crypto or monopoly money,
Yeah, just if they'll add a lot more to the money supply. We're already at like probably a 20% inflation rate this year. They do that for, 5 or 6 more years. And, basically if they devalue the dollar 10 times, then all of a sudden 37 trillion becomes 3.7 trillion in real dollars. You know what I mean? So it would be like taking the equivalent of 3.7 trillion today and just paying off the debt with notes that are worth less. Which, I mean, who really even would get hurt by that? If you think about it, most of our debt is only to the Federal Reserve. We owe China like 2 trillion, something like that's really nothing. We could pay that if we really wanted to. We could just pay that. But the majority of the debt we have is just right to the Federal Reserve. Fuck the Federal Reserve. Like, we could really just pay China and then default on the debt we have to the Federal Reserve and tell them to kick rocks.
Yeah, I don't know. Someone might get JFK'd if they did something like that. But I think, the libertarian solution fixes all these things with housing, getting rid of income tax and property tax, but it would even affect healthcare. Because if you think about how many billions the hospitals would save if they didn't have to pay income tax, you know what they would then be able to afford? The few percentage of their patients who don't have insurance. And they could pick that up because they would have the extra money to create the resources. So that's when the private sector can thrive.
How much do we actually generate with income tax in this country? Do you know?
I'd have to grok it.
Jamie, pull that up.
I'd have to grok it.
I want to look it up real quick because I'm curious. How much revenue is generated through federal income tax in the United States annually? Bro, it's not even that. It's 2.4 trillion.
It's nothing. It's laziness why we still
So theoretically, if Trump didn't increase the budget by 4 trillion, then the Doge cuts would have covered getting rid of income taxes.
That would have worked, but they stopped trying to do that immediately. The whole tariffs for income tax thing, what happened with that? That went right out the window.
They just say
higher taxes, higher tariffs.
So that would eliminate the federal income tax, and then you just have to go state by state. And since some states already don't have it, theoretically, you could just move to Florida and you would have no income tax anymore. That's honestly would change a lot of people's lives. If you make $100,000 a year as a household, you would have an extra $30,000 a year. You'd have 30% more money overnight. And now imagine that's even more of a dramatic difference for somebody making, let's say, $50,000 a year, and you have an extra $15,000. You go from having, let's say, $35,000 left after taxes every year to having $50,000 left. That's a huge difference for somebody like that.
That should drive everyone to the Libertarian Party. So
it should.
Get rid of income tax.
And on that note, I want to trade places with our other guest here, so you guys could talk more libertarian. You could do the intro for your boy here, because I want to let you do the intro.
Yeah, I want to introduce my good friend, Vinny the Guido. They call me Guido Vin. He's Vinny the Guido, old friend of mine, but he's also a libertarian.
And a degenerate gambler. Just kidding.
And I want to bring him on to talk about what made you a libertarian and what's been going on with you and your freedom fight.
Well,
so take it away, brother.
I mean, I'm going to be my real name is Vincent DiBenedetto. My stage name is Vinny the Guido in pro wrestling. Here's the thing. Technically, I'm not a part of any party, but if I was, I'd lean more towards being a libertarian. I mean, in my opinion, I think all politicians are tyrannical and corrupt anyway, but I noticed that, like, if I was to choose a party, it would definitely be libertarian. I mean, I was listening to the conversation you guys had earlier, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, it's so true. It's like, but the problem is, and I hate to say this because I'm American and everything, but Americans are ignorant. Let's just be honest. And the government thrives on Americans to be ignorant because, and it's by design. You're not ignorant because you're ignorant. You're ignorant because that's how you're programmed to be. Think about it. In schools, they should be teaching meditation. Kids would be fighting a lot less if they learned meditation in school. They should teach kids about taxes and how to be a good parent and stuff like this. But
why we shouldn't have taxes specifically.
Yeah, exactly. But there really shouldn't be taxes because, what are they going to do? The government funds their pockets every single time. There's so much tyrannical corruption going on in our government. It's insane.
Let me ask you this. What do you think do you think the Department of Education should exist? It's basically a federal bureaucracy that makes all the decisions for all the schools, and that's where a lot of the money's going, since you mentioned education and how there's no common sense in education. And what would prevent a teacher from making a class about meditation was it wouldn't be up to Department of Education guidelines. See how they do that?
Yeah.
So
it's exactly it.
Department of
Ed. Even my wife and I, we agree that I believe that the schools should teach what's going to help people in the real world. And we don't believe in the school system. They brainwash you. They tell you you have civil rights when you're in school, but they don't tell you what those rights technically are. And that's by design because they don't want you or your younger generation to know anything about your civil rights. 78% of Americans, and it's probably higher than that at this point, but statistically, from what I read, 78% of Americans have zero clue about what their civil rights are. Everyone just assumes that they have the right to this and the right to that, but they don't on certain things. And there's certain things that they don't realize that they have rights, but they're so ignorant to it that they never exercise something that they know nothing about. 78%. That is a big number to not know what your civil rights are. And the 12% of people that do know their civil rights, only 3% stand up for your civil rights. Whether you agree with it or not, everybody has a right to their own views and opinions. We don't have to agree with it. Just like everybody's got an asshole, everybody's got an opinion.
No, true. I think that's the hurdle for, a lot of these things. The Libertarian Party, civil rights is just wakening up the people to what's possible. You know what I mean? I think libertarians are most consistent on civil rights.
Every civil right is equally important. One person's civil right isn't any more important than somebody else's civil rights. And that is the thing. Like, you don't have to like what someone's doing, but if they have a right to do it, you need to respect that.
Absolutely.
There's things I don't like in life, but I know people have a right to do it. You guys were mentioning about the abortions before, right? Listen, I think it's wrong, and the real judge is the man upstairs. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Listen, you may have a right to get an abortion, and I believe in women's rights to be able to, it's their own body, but the only person that's going to really judge is the man upstairs. If you want to jump through that hurdle, that's up to you. If you want to go to hell, that's up to you. I don't like it. I don't think you should do it, but it's your right to do it. And you know what? I support your right to do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Libertarians believe you can be as liberal or conservative as you want, as long as you don't forcefully impose that on other people.
Exactly.
So that's what's key. That's what's key with that, for forcing the will on other people. But, we're consistent on gun rights. We don't want to be wasting tax dollars on victimless crimes or somebody smoking a joint in the car.
And you don't have to like their opinion, but I know as a libertarian, you respect that opinion anyway. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things I don't like. You know what I mean? Like, and if you see, for example, you see a lot of these First Amendment auditors, and you see a lot of Second Amendment auditors and all that stuff, right? There's certain First Amendment auditors that I think do it the right way. And there's certain First Amendment auditors that I see that I don't like the way they do it, but that still doesn't take away the fact that they have a right to do it any way they want. I don't have to like how they do it. And there's ones that I like how they do it. But at the end of the day, they still have a right to do it, whether you like their approach or not. Everybody has their own way of being an activist.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I know you're part of a lot of big communities, so I want to ask you this question, and then maybe we can segue to some criminal rights stuff. But, you know, you're big in the wrestling community. You've been a pro wrestling promoter for a long time.
Oh, no. I'm a worker in the industry, but, you know.
Gotcha. But so what do you think prevents, like, so between your work in the sex work industry, your work in the wrestling industry?
I'm not a sex worker. I am not a sex worker.
Libertarians believe in sex work.
Yes. And then you know what? And I think that's another thing. I think bordellos should be legal because listen, I got news for you. Sex workers, like Nevada, for example, where they have bordellos, right? Do you know having sex with a sex worker, you're not going to get any diseases. Why? Because they get tested all the time. And the second they get one disease, they lose their license. They can't do sex work. So they're safer to have sex with than a random woman you find at the bar.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of societal benefits. In Amsterdam, they saw a drop in violent rapes and things like that. I think ultimately we should all be trying to...
And it's women's bodies.
Find a wife and have kids. But in terms of society, I don't think the government should be able to charge either one a victimless crime. If nobody's complaining,
they're not killing anybody.
Complaining and the woman isn't complaining, the government shouldn't be able to come in and intervene on that transaction.
I agree.
But what do you think would stop, like, you're involved with a big motorcycle club, the sex industry, we'll say, and the wrestling industry. What do you think stops such independent, raw American groups like that from voting libertarian? Because if those three groups alone came over, it would make a huge, huge difference electorally.
Of course it would. But I'll tell you, not mentioning the club that I'm with, but I'll tell you the reason why. And it's most likely because they don't want to be involved with politics. Whether they agree with the politics, they still vote and everything, but they don't bring up politics. And it's bad enough that they get labeled by the government as it is. Now, if they start throwing politics into the mix, they're going to get looked at even harder. So I can't really blame them for not getting involved with politics. But, I mean, a lot of the times we, especially with our club, we do a lot of community outreach. We do a lot of charity. We try to take care of the community. And we do try to work with politicians because, there are politicians that, obviously to show good faith to the public. They do it. They say it's because they care, but honestly, I think they do it just to smooth things over with the citizens. You know what I mean?
100%.
That's my opinion. But if it's going to help the community at the same time with charity and stuff like that, I don't mind, but at the same time, I know why they're doing it. It's a lot different reason why we're doing it, though. We're doing it because we actually care about citizens.
I fear we're getting to a point where even if you're not into politics, politics are into you, right? We saw that over COVID.
Yeah.
Everyone got forced to
everybody has to wear a mask. And now they're going back to, now in Nassau County, it's a crime to wear a mask. Did you know that?
Yeah, the of Oz.
Like, I don't understand this. It's like, first of all, it's your First Amendment right. You can wear whatever the hell you want as long as you're not hurt. That to me, that law is completely a violation of people's First Amendment right to express themselves. Who is the government to say whether you can and can't wear a mask? And here's the thing. And they say, it's because of security reasons. But one of our founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, one of our founding fathers of our great nation, Benjamin Franklin once said, "Those who give up liberty for security deserve neither."
Absolutely.
What does that tell you, folks? That means we shouldn't have to give up our rights for people's feelings and security. Freedom is scary. But without our freedoms, we might as well just live in North Korea. Or go back to Nazi Germany time. All right? Remember when you had to show out during the Nazis? If they said they wanted to see your credentials, you had to show them.
100%. That's what keeps me a libertarian. Vote libertarian.
The Fourth Amendment exists for a reason, folks. And the fact of what happened to me especially